things that are going on around recession, inflation, all of these things put together are causing a lot of challenges.
Everything is falling apart and I have to...
Yes, but I can't fall apart. That's the thing. You have to be... It's frantic legs under the surface, but you've got to be calm and collected and be the face and be the leader on the outside.
Welcome everyone with a new episode of the Event Effect. Today I'm joined with two of the most amazing people that I've met so far via LinkedIn, both actually. I'm here today with Ruby. She is actually with the Event Hub, focusing on events for mainly entrepreneurs, if I recall that correct. But Ruby, you can always fill in if you like. And together with her, also Alistair is joining us today. He's with SWM Partners Limited. I almost struggled over that name, mainly focusing on the pharma industry. And today we will be talking about event strategy. Welcome both. It's a pleasure to have you. I'm really honored to have you in this room. First question we would like to ask you, how did you actually got started in the event industry and ended up in event strategy? Ruby, if you would like to kick off.
Such a great question to start with. Thanks, Marijn. So I started in the events industry through hospitality. I did a degree in hospitality management, and I kind of anticipated that my career would take me into hotel management and sort of the traditional types of hospitality. And when I graduated, events wasn't what it is these days. So I wasn't even aware of events until I'd got to my internship. So I discovered events and found my calling. And as soon as I found events, I knew nothing else was going to compare to the world of events and exhibitions and the buzz of our industry. So I fell into events. I worked venue side, I worked client side, and then agency side. And then it was agency that broke me after not a very long time. And so I left agency with not much of a plan, but a plan that I wouldn't work for anybody else. And I only wanted to start my own business and work for myself. So that was nearly 11 years ago, still here. And still, I believe I have a passion for events and event planning and strategy more now maybe than ever before.
Awesome. What an amazing story. I love your entrepreneurial spirit. Alistair, I know you have quite a different background. How did you ended up in events and event strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Marijn. And interesting to hear Ruby's story as well, because I do consider that I fell into events as well. And it's bringing back funny memories because I started out agency side. I did an apprenticeship for a company called MD Group, and it was an apprenticeship doing their venue sourcing. But I distinctly remember in my interview having not done any kind of office or agency role before, sort of really trying to play up how much experience I had. And I think I referenced, I've helped my parents plan parties and stuff before, kind of like, and it did the job. So you can call experience from anywhere, right? So I started out venue sourcing, so working with MD Group on sourcing the hotels or the conference centers for the events that they were putting on for pharmaceutical companies as well. And I think that was probably my first taste of this kind of strategizing, not just within events, but also within work in general. There's actually quite a lot of strategy required to source the venue, to understand the flow of the event, what levels everything's going to happen on. And whilst it feels natural to that role, actually calling it out as strategy, I think, is quite smart. And that's almost where the event strategy needs to begin for me for face-to-face events. It is the venue.
Awesome. I like both your backgrounds, and it's so nice that we kind of all fell into it. It was pretty much the same for me, and just loved events, and it gets you hooked, and you never want to turn back. Awesome. In terms
events is the industry of lunatics.
Yes,
if you don't
so
get
true.
Else, you'll fit in events.
Yeah, you either have to be half mad or fully mad to be in events. Yeah. You can't be normal.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely. But that also makes fun, and let's imagine that everyone is normal, right? How boring would the world be? Interesting. In terms of what you're seeing right now in event industry and especially in event strategy, are there any trends going on right now? Alistair, would you like to start that one off?
Yeah, I'd love to kick us off. I think the two biggest trends that I'm noticing is that people's attention span for these kind of events is getting shorter and shorter. And I think there's various reasons for that. The rise of social media, such as TikTok and Instagram Reels, being one of them, in the fact that content is either 30 seconds, 1 minute, or 90 seconds. So we're fighting for people's attention span, combined with all of the other priorities that they might have taken on recently coming out of COVID. Life is getting a lot busier again, more responsibilities are being added on as life slowly returns to some resemblance of normal. And I think through that, the lifespan of the event has increased. It's no longer just a day, it's no longer just a month. Even in the planning period, there's a longer kind of follow-up period of providing resources for perhaps people to review in their own time, and just competing with all of the other conflicts they have. The event itself is quite short and sharp, and it's the key messages, and the follow-up and the marketing kind of includes all the superfluous other content surrounding it.
I can imagine that really enhances kind of your strategizing skill set, as in you have to think about so much more than just one day. We already used to, but now with longer lifespans, I think that is quite a challenge. How about you, Ruby? Is that the same for you? Do you see also other trends going on?
Absolutely. I think some of the trends that I'm seeing are around kind of people committing to showing up to events. So that, I think, is a big challenge in our industry just now. And I think because post-pandemic, people are either traveling more, or they're on holidays, or they're out and about more, they're having meetings. Trying to get people to firstly register and commit to your event is one thing, but having people actually show up when they're so busy, either doing business or work stuff, or they're doing personal things, or they're playing golf or something, getting people to actually show up to your event is a big feat. And I think that is a challenge that we're all really sort of trying to work with just now, because we're finding that dropout rates, conversion rates are a lot lower. And it even spills into what I'm seeing on the sponsorship side is a lot of organizations at this point are really struggling with getting commitment from sponsors as well. So it's been slow. And I think that this is something I've been talking about the last few months, is that the post-pandemic summer break has been quite different from usual summer breaks. And I've spoken to people in different industries who've had a very quiet summer. I've spoken to people in other industries who've had a busy summer. And for us as an events company, things were quieter. Nobody was committing to everything because everybody went, I'm on holiday. This is the first time I've got away for, 2-3 years. I don't want to talk about work. I don't want to commit to anything. And then in the wider world, with things that are going on around recession, inflation, all of these things put together are causing a lot of challenges with getting people to either attend our events, particularly face-to-face, when we're asking people to travel and stay in hotels and so on. And even with sponsorships, is putting budget and money behind events. There's a lot of kind of, we'll wait till 2023, we'll wait and see what's happening. So commitment at the moment, I'm finding is a big one.
Awesome. Yeah, I can only agree. I think the whole industry is feeling that one. There are so many parameters involved. You named the recession as one, but also the, as many call it, revenge holiday taking of many people. I definitely see that a lot. In terms of effect on your day-to-day job, like, can you name some real life examples of, for instance, dealing with that trend, dealing with the struggle of people not willing to commit? How do you approach that from a strategy perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is when you're looking at the budgets and the finance side of things, because if we're running an event that's free for our delegates to attend, then we either need funding, we need sponsorships, we need someone somewhere to commit to a pot of money to help us to run that event and host it for free for our delegates. On the flip side of that, delegates, attendees, participants are looking at events going, why is that event charging me, a couple of £100 when I can get that content somewhere else, either on YouTube or pre-recorded or, on a live stream for free? Why do I then need to part with money to be able to access this content? So it goes back to what Alistair said, is that there's this kind of this competition almost, and we're fighting with this short form content. So how do we get that value proposition over to our delegates around parting with money if they have to part with money? On the other side, how do we then put that value proposition onto the sponsors to say, these are all the wonderful things that you get for your sponsorship, if only half the people turn up. So it's really, really challenging. And I think the biggest challenge that I'm seeing at the moment is in face-to-face, whereas it's difficult because at face-to-face you have your venue. Okay, so face-to-face or hybrid, you're booking your venue space, you're committing to numbers, there's catering, there's suppliers, there's so much to consider when you're booking. So committing to those numbers when you don't know what those numbers are, such a challenge. I mean, I know I've said challenge about 50 times already, but it's really difficult. And so I think there's so much there. But then you've got the camp of people who go, oh, I'm over virtual events. Virtual doesn't do anything for me. Online, digital events, those are so 2021. I'm done. And so we're really challenged every single day as to what we do next, what we advise our clients, because this is all about strategy today. So it's about being strategic with our clients, whether they run a business or an organization or a pharmaceutical company. So lots and lots of kind of bumps in the road, but we're still smiling, we're still here. And, it goes back to that, we must be crazy, right?
Exactly. But it is very strong. Can you name like one example where you actually managed to get someone who initially didn't want to commit, and what did you do in order to make that person go with you on that road?
Yeah, so I have been helping a client with some sponsorship for an event, and then we'll be on site for the event as well. So that's kind of our role in this particular project. And it's been great to amplify our client or our partners' events to our networks, because there are so many people within our individual networks that we can reach out to that our clients potentially could never get to. So I've been sort of fairly successful in helping this client to reach out to new potential sponsors, to new potential partners for more kind of long-term work. And sponsors doesn't always have to be financial. It could be kind of reciprocal agreements and arrangements between events in different parts of the country or in different parts of the world, or just events of different but complementary formats or structures or content. So that's been really good, because making those introductions has been helpful in both those parties being able to get something out of it. So I think we need to look kind of beyond sponsorship and partnership just being a financial exchange. It's got to be so much more. And I was going to mention another trend, community, but that opens up, a whole host of other things. But it is all about kind of building value and building community as well. So there's so much that events impacts. And I think we are, people like Alistair and myself are out there, and Mirai, I know you too, championing the fact that events should really be central to an organization's strategy, because they have an impact on absolutely everything else that a business or an organization does.
Absolutely agree. And I think that it's a great strategy to kind of look for synergies even outside of monetary additions, and also the long term. Like, we're not here for one-off. We look at the future and see how we can add value. Alistair, do you have kind of the same real life experiences regarding this topic?
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually, Ruby touched on a really good point about the commitment, because we have seen, over the past couple of years, it's very easy to not show up to a virtual event after registering. And there's probably a bit less guilt because, okay, so, they've paid for their streaming software and streaming equipment, but there's not a flight booked in your name. There's not travel that you're wasting. So there's almost a disconnection in the value that the planner has booked into the attendee cancelling or not showing up or not registering. But something that we're seeing, and this probably isn't even just limited to the pharmaceutical companies, is that in order to gain that commitment from the attendees, the pharmaceutical company will take them to something they've already committed to. So we've seen a huge amount of congresses. ESMO is literally taking place whilst we record this episode. There's a lot of add-on meetings taking place that so many agencies are arranging, not just SWM as well, because the attendance is already there. And again, it's about maximizing that audience experience of, I can attend 2 events that I need to go to. I'm already going to ESMO or the Congress, but I can also go and catch up with this pharmaceutical company that's putting on this event for my particular training. There's less of a burden on having to travel twice in a year or twice in a month. And it's kind of a win-win situation. The content gets out there, but the attendees are also satisfied, and they're not taking too much time, or at least additional time out of their schedule if they've already committed to the Congress.
And great. I totally see that as well. I think it's definitely not limited to the pharmaceutical industry. I think it's for the whole event industry in that case. And yeah, for you as well. Like, can you name like an example of what you did in terms of strategizing to, yeah, take that into account and actually get the most out of the fact that people might want to go to multiple events, maybe in a day even. How do you strategize for that to make sure that they definitely attend your event?
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's a really good point. And it all comes down to this E word that you either love or you hate, and that is engagement. Love it or hate it, it has to be part of your strategy. I will say, I'm sure there's another word for it that you might prefer. But it's about engaging with the attendees from the very beginning. I've talked on this before on the past with some of Vivox and their events. I think you have to get attendees buy-in from the very beginning. So not just asking for their input, a couple of weeks before. It has to be in the whole strategy of 2 months before, contacting them, saying you're really looking forward to seeing them there, welcoming them to suggest topics, to ask questions to the speakers in advance, to meet the speakers. You have to really make them commit, not only time-wise, but commit content-wise, so that they really feel almost endeared to kind of show up. I've suggested that agenda topic. I've already asked that question to that speaker. I already kind of know them. So now I really want to show up. I've been invited to so many events, but this is the one that I'm going to go to because I feel most connected to the content because I've had my say.
Awesome. I love that, building relationships for a much longer, and that's also what you mentioned, right? Like the lifespan of events has really gone beyond what everyone was doing, especially before COVID. I think like we just realized so much more that we can do so much more because the expectations also went up. And Ruby, you previously quickly mentioned communities. I think that also kind of goes along with this more long-term approach. Would you like to explain a bit more of what you meant with the trend communities that you saw?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Alistair, that you've just said about getting people involved in building the agenda, or making them feel really warmed up so they feel they've got a stake in that event before they even show up, and they have a much higher chance of showing up because they're almost kind of emotionally engaged in your event as well. So I think from a community perspective, this is again something that if we were speaking in 2021, there was this kind of idea of always on events, and we all had time, we were all at home, we were working in a different kind of world, whereas now that there's more travel, there's more movement, people are out some more. I've seen that people are saying, I don't want things to be always on, because actually then that leads to overwhelm and all of these other things that come from an expectation, I think, to be connected with all these different communities, and you might be part of many various and diverse communities. So I think when we talk about sense of building community, it could be that one of your communities is your team at work, your internal community, and then another community could be a membership, another community could be another space. But I think generally when we use the word community, we're talking about being involved and engaged and interacting with a group that makes you feel valued as an individual, that makes you feel seen, that makes you feel that you have a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. So I think the word community goes beyond, I think, what community traditionally might have meant, or what you kind of think automatically when you say community. But I think it is about making individuals feel that they are part of something, and not just a bum on a seat or a number in an exhibition. It's making people feel beyond that, and feel more human and feel part of something. I think for me, it's a big sense of belonging, about visibility, about being valued, and that for me is community in a much wider sense.
I can only agree. And is that something you are already implementing in your current strategy, that you're advising your clients to actually start implementing as well?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely that sense. I think there's also a fine line of, we don't want then our audiences, our participants, our whatever term you use for your delegates, to feel bombarded or overwhelmed by us constantly communicating with them, because there is also that, you could do that and then they could completely switch off. But it's about making People communicating perhaps more regularly than just here's our annual conference, buy a ticket, and then going quiet on them, and then starting up again when it's time for the next one. So it's about making people feel part of something, making them feel visible and valued, and asking for contributions, like Alistair said so well there as well. So I think communication is a big thing. And again, when we talk about strategy, if we're looking at organizations or businesses, it's about working with other areas, other specialisms in the business, whether it's marketing or other operations, to ensure that everything is kind of, events aren't just working separately over here doing events. Marketing isn't working separately doing marketing. It's all cohesive, and then we're communicating together. So there are some great examples out there, seeing some really good stuff. But I think sometimes it does feel like events and marketing and these sorts of disciplines in times of a recession or in challenging times can be something that you just drop, and you pick up again when times are good. So it's quite interesting to see how various businesses and organizations are adapting differently and doing different things and new things to kind of tackle all these challenges that we're being thrown.
Absolutely. Do you experience the same, Alistair? Is that sounds like something you heard before?
Definitely. No, I was certainly nodding all the way through what Ruby was saying. And I think community for me is about value exchange, especially when you talk about events. So many people or stakeholders for an event think I want to, give these people value, but it's also about them being valued back for attending. And I think something that resides with me so much is that whilst we're talking about strategy, and a strategy is laid down and followed, the post on LinkedIn that comes to mind of someone outlining what the plan looks like, which is like a straight upward trajectory, but then in reality it's zigzagging all over the place. And I think the same applies to event strategy, and ever more so we have to be so agile. And I think that the COVID times and having to convert everything to online for the entire industry has given us this agility of being able to adapt to different things, and no one event is ever the same. In fact, it's vastly different from the last and should be treated as such in terms of its strategy and being able to serve its needs, serve the stakeholders' needs, but serve the community's needs as well, but all cohesively, like you say, Ruby, about working across departments of the stakeholder company.
I hear so many good examples, experiences, but also trends that are going on that really people need to take into account. And I'm just very curious to hear, like, what are your top, maybe most funny or maybe horror stories that you have experienced in event strategy? I'm so curious to hear this, both from you. Ruby, maybe you would like to kick off.
Yeah, so I'm going to kick off with one example where we had a client. I finished up with them just before the summer, working on a short-term project. But the client had planned to run a hybrid conference to serve their audience. So they'd already kind of planned out what the event needed to do, what the objectives were, some of the expectations, but there was a change of the person that was in charge of the project moved on. I was brought in to work with them, and it was a case of baptism of fire, literally just coming in as an external person, not knowing the industry, not knowing, all these acronyms that work in their sector, and all these people, and coming as the outsider, and everybody's kind of looking at me as if, you're the new person looking for answers. And what was quite interesting, that although they had gone down the route of putting so many things in place, they hadn't really thought about the kind of experience that they wanted to create until they were already in that process. So I think one of the biggest things, and I've spoke a lot about this over the last few years, is that when it comes to event strategy, you really have to nail down the intention of your event. You have to be very, very intentional, not just at the strategy stage, but other stages as well. But more importantly, at the strategy stage, so that when you are communicating what this event needs to be and what it needs to do and what kind of experience you need to have, you really, really have to have very, very clear what the intention and purpose and experience of that event is going to be. And that has a knock-on effect on everything. Alistair, you were talking about the venue and the location, and that had already been booked before I got there. So we had some issues there because the the kit that was booked was completely wrong for the sort of conference that we're trying to do. It was in fact hybrid meeting kit, one of these pods in a meeting room, not something you would use for a conference, but that needed a big production. So everything that had kind of been put in place was people not really being event experts, understandably, because they have day jobs and they're the experts in what they do, but B, really not setting that intention and that plan of what that event needs to be at the very start. So we really, when we start working with our clients, we sit down and we talk about these things. And they might seem very fluffy, what's the intention, what's the purpose, but it really has a big impact on everything else that you do, whether it's picking your location and then picking your venue within your location, or whether it's the event design and agenda. So intention and purpose, those things, if those are kind of planned out, then hopefully we can avoid the horror stories, Marion.
Absolutely. Were you actually able to turn that horror story around, and how did you do it?
Yes. Well, I had to clear my diary from everything else that I was committed to for 4 months.
Can imagine.
But we got there and they were very happy. And it's also one of the key things for us was leveraging the partnerships of, production and experts who know the tech, who know what they're doing, who come in with their expertise. And, we're already working with this partner anyway, but they came in, they helped us to make that event so successful. And we kind of flew at the end, but it's really just knowing what you're sort of been dealt, tackling those. And for me, I had to just clear the decks of everything else so I could focus. But yeah, we could have saved ourselves a lot of stress if we'd started off with the right plans and intentions.
Absolutely. Like a good foundation is essential. And when someone sets a wrong foundation and then starts building, you kind of have to come in and sweep everything and start from the ground up. That's not the most efficient. Alistair, how about you? Because before we started this recording, you kind of mentioned, like, I have so many stories, I can't wait to tell them. And I'm very curious. You made me very curious. Like, what are your stories? Are there horror or happy stories?
Oh, yes. No, I love a good horror story. And I think that it's great to have this segment because everyone has things that go wrong. Like no one's perfect. And I always used to come home offsite kind of telling my partner, Rob, X, Y, and Z went wrong. And he'd be like, oh, but how did that impact the audience? How did that impact the client? And I was like, oh, well, no, I kind of fixed it. And he'd be like, well, so there you go. It's not actually a horror story. But the one that particularly comes to mind is we were in Denver and I awoke about 5 a.m. to a knock on the door from my project executive telling me the hotel power was completely out. So I was like, right, okay, never dealt with this before, heard about it happening to people. Okay, guess this is my time. So get my clothes on quick, go downstairs. And the general management of the hotel is sort of waiting for us. A big event sort of booked out most of the hotel. Didn't have many other guests in house that weren't our kind of event guests. So we sat down and said, oh, okay, what's gone wrong? Like, will it come back online? And I think some kind of like a coyote or something had gone into the power grid. So it completely fried out the whole block. So, at least I was me and not the coyote. But so we sat down and sort of said, right, okay, what happens if this doesn't come on? Because we've got main show day today, like all of the set, didn't have a backup generator or anything like that. All of the set was obviously coming out of the hotel. So sort of sat down and said, okay, so attendees, they're going to be hungry. No one wants to go to an event hungry. What can you cook without power? What can we do? Do you have gas? Can we warm up croissants? Like how can we do this? So we put together a plan of breakfast, and it was essentially going to be kind of like a continental, which, not the end of the world, but not ideal, but okay in the circumstances. And as for the event, we were very lucky because in our strategy, we'd included, they used to go by educational measures in those days, but I believe they're now called Array. And essentially it's an iPad solution that it sort of forms an individual notebook via the iPad for attendees. So they can look at the slides in close detail right in front of them rather than up on screen. And all of those, so I phoned my tech guy for them and he was like, well, all of the iPads were charged overnight. So they charged before the power had gone. It didn't have the latest copy of the slide deck on because those would have been loaded the morning of, but it did have a backup version of the slide. So I was like, right, okay. So someone can in theory stand at the front of the room and we can go, right, everyone flick to the next page because this is the next slide I'm going to talk about. And so we kind of put this low-key classroom backup plan of this general session in place, fortunately having these offline versions. And then the hotel power came back on and we all went about our business, but we had the backup plan just in case.
Brilliant. That was close.
Yeah, so very close
indeed.
call.
I like how resilient you have shown to be, as you mentioned, like the industry is resilient, but this is a great example of just, oh shit, everything is falling apart and I have to...
Yes, but I can't fall apart. That's the thing. You have to be, it's
true.
frantic legs under the surface, but you've got to be calm and collected and be the face and be the leader on the outside.
I love
Especially.
that. I love that. Everything's falling apart, but I can't fall apart. That is the bottom line, isn't it, Alistair? Love it. I'm going to use that.
I love this. This is going to be the snippet of the podcast.
Just change the title, Marion. Marion, just change the title. Make it that. That's it. Job done.
Love it. Any like funny stories that have to be shared? Give everyone a good laugh outside of that. I just laughed about your horror story. I'm sorry.
Alistair, have you got funny stories? You've probably got funny stories.
Oh yeah, like probably countless. I think that we were saying at the start, event industry people are lunatics or whatever, and that's just a joke really. But I think that to work in events, you can't take yourself too seriously. And there have been so many times where sort of people around me or colleagues have said like, oh, God, how did you do that in the moment? And I was like, because at the end of the day, I'm almost having an out of body experience when I'm planning an event because I'm trying to serve the individuals and the clients. So another horror/funny story is I had an event in London where I booked a coach company from Hammersmith to take us into Green Park. I think it was. There's a medical venue on the outskirts of Green Park that we were having a gala dinner at. And I specifically emailed that coach company saying, here are the contact details for the venue. Can you just agree where you're going to drop people off, where you're going to load them in? And so I advanced to that dinner venue, did all my checks there. And then the lead travel person on the first coach phones me and says, so where are we going to meet and drop off? Because the venue it's closed. They don't allow coaches within a certain vicinity of the park, within the grounds. And I was like, right, okay. Put aside the anger I'm experiencing from telling someone to do their job and they haven't done it. Again, I had to run, I think it was running down the high street, the London high street, quite a busy high street, holding my clipboard in the air, flagging down this bus of all my clients and event attendees, like in full kind of suit, running down the high street and waving this bus down and then getting them all off and then walking them through this sort of strange alleyway route to reveal this, what was a very stunning offsite dinner venue. But I remember my team being like, can't believe you did that. And I was like, yeah, but how else would you do it? Like, what would I do? Calmly walk down the high street? They needed to recognize that frantic event planner on the high street to pull over and guide them to the venue. So I think it's totally, and that story brings me no shame because the event at the end of the day went well. So my job was kind of done. So yeah, I think it's truly about not taking yourself too seriously. So I've probably got thousands of funny stories because of the way I am.
It's definitely if working in events is definitely character building, I think. And I think once you've done things like that, you have no shame. You have no, you just get in and you do, because my philosophy is always just make it happen. And if there's a problem, you've got to firefight it. Fix it in that moment. Don't waste any time. Just go and do what needs to be done. And I think so many people who don't do events and you recognize those people if they've been tasked with running an event or being on a registration desk. We all recognize those people, and they're flapping, and suddenly everybody's flapping, and everything's just up in the air, and it's chaos. Whereas I think our responsibility as event professionals is that we come in and we bring that sense of calm and control. And most things you can control. There are certain things that can happen, like medical emergencies or things at events, and those things happen if you're at the supermarket, or they happen at sports stadiums, and those things. That's when you bring in the professionals and the medical staff. But generally, I think 99% of things you can fix in the moment. And if you have that character, as you said, Alistair, that you just kind of, you've built this resilient character because you've dealt with so many things and you've dealt with so many people, then you just like, bring it on, we can deal with it, we'll handle it. And if you have that team behind you who you can just delegate to, or who just jump in when you need them to, or that are just there for moral support or otherwise, you can achieve anything. And I think the great thing about events is that, sort of working in events has helped me build my personal development. My personal growth has been phenomenal, especially the last couple of years in the pandemic, because I think get through a pandemic, running a business in events, can mostly achieve anything.
You can do anything.
You can literally do anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. So many great examples. I'm sure there are many more, and we already touched upon quite a lot of very nice insights for our listeners. But if you had to pick like one, the most important thing for event professionals to keep in mind, Ruby, what would it be for you?
My one piece of advice, and this has been a bit of a bugbear, especially recently, is do what is right for the client and the people that they serve. Do not do what you think is right for you, either as a business or as an industry or as a sector. Because at the moment, there's so much going on in the events industry around, virtual versus face-to-face. Nobody's against anyone. At the end of the day, do what's right for your clients and what is right for the people that they serve. That's absolute number one. And, hopefully that will always be my number one.
I love it. I think it's a very important one. Alistair, what is your number one most important thing to keep in mind for event professionals right now?
I would say that to be a part of your strategy. So strategy isn't something that event planners sit above and look down upon. You are very much part of the event. So dive in and be a part of it. Don't just execute the strategy, but immerse yourself in the actual event, because that's the only way that you'll provide the most optimum experience, is by actually being a part of it.
Brilliant.
Love it. Short to the point, but very valuable. I'm sure really, like, I think our listeners really get tons of value here. Like, it's all there for free, but actually you should be paying for this podcast because this will take you to the next level.
Our PayPal links in the show notes.
Exactly, yeah.
You can buy Alistair and Ruby a coffee. No, I want to really, really thank you so much for joining me today. It was really a pleasure to have both of you as a guest. I think we had a great conversation with a lot of valuable insights for our listeners. So with that, if you want to say a last thank you to our listeners, be my guest. Now's the time.
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been such a pleasure, everyone. Hope you got some value out of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For our listeners, we obviously would love to see you or have you join us on the next episode. For now, I wish you all a very pleasant day. Thank you for listening. To the next one.